Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, guys, I hope everyone is doing okay today. I went to the Left Forum yesterday, and I had an amazing time at the Left Forum, at least for the first day. The second day, there were certain issues associated with me having 3 mojitos. That being said, I made some amazing contacts there. One of the amazing contacts that I met was a progressive candidate running in New Jersey for Senate, Lisa McCormick. So she's here today. They have elections tomorrow. So I invited her onto the show because I liked what I was hearing last night or the night before when I was talking to her. Lisa, please tell my audience hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa McCormick, and I'm running for Senate against Bob Menendez tomorrow on June 5th. And so I'm the progressive candidate versus the incumbent. And, I don't know if you want to just ask me questions or you want me to go through the platform.
No. Ask questions. So just inviting you in. I'm making sure the audience, okay. I make sure they can hear me. They're saying it's hollow, which I don't know. That's never happened before. But let's keep going. Let's see if it changes. So yes, I want to ask you questions. So New Jersey politics. This is somewhat amazing. What got you into politics in the first place? Why are you running? Like I often ask this question of Democrats, what do you believe in? And it's just like, what are your values? But before we get to that point, what got you into the political sphere in New Jersey?
Well, like everyone else, I get my ballot in the mail, and it seems that I have a choice between bad and worse. And this, as this election turns out, it seems that without my name on the ballot, it would have been the same thing. We had an indicted Democrat, or who was, I think it ended up in a mistrial, but this is the guy who is supposed to make bribery illegal. And he said, well, it's just a few bucks between friends. Friends, of course, the guy that he had met was someone who he had met at a political fundraiser, and it ended up that he started advocating for this guy. And so that this guy, he was trying to help him cover up on Medicare fraud. And, let's just say a little bit more than what most friends do. And then Bob Hugin, who is going to be the Republican candidate, is a pharmaceutical CEO. And if anyone's familiar with how Medicare, if we did a Medicare for all, if we were able to pass that, Medicare was not even able to negotiate with the drug companies to get fair prices for drugs. So this is probably not one of the guys that we want representing us. And I tell everybody, well, I'm the grassroots candidate. I'm not taking drug money, or I should say money from drug companies or the NRA or anything like that. And we're doing a very large grassroots organization where we're getting donations from private donors, but we're also, keeping the election or the campaign as inexpensive as we can, because we don't want to owe anything to anybody. It's not once you take a giant campaign contribution, they say, okay, well, if you took it from the gas companies, we want you to make sure that we have legislation allowing us to continue in New Jersey, for fracking or whatever.
Give me 1 second. I'm having trouble with the sound on my end. It's solely on my end. I'm trying to fix this. Let's see. Yeah, I'm totally sorry, Lisa. I can't hear you. And I think that's purely on my end. So let me try to fix this. Disable. Test. Why can't I hear you? Why can't I hear you? I'm not hearing any sound. Okay, let's do this. Essentially, you're running because of corruption. Ultimately, you look at the ballot choices and you're like, both of these ballot choices are horrible. And they are persistently horrible. And if somebody's going to run, I guess it's this thing of Keith Olbermann. Keith Olbermann is kind of on people's horrible list at this point. But one of the things he said that's absolutely true, and I think it's right. He said he was on an airplane and he was listening to Bush. And he said to himself, he was enraged by Bush. Now, mind you, he's just a Democratic hack. But he was enraged by Bush and what Bush was saying. He was like, why don't anybody say anything about this? And he realized, wait a minute, I have a show. I can say something about this. Ultimately, your reasoning is somewhat the same. These people are horrible choices. If somebody needs to do something, wait a minute, that somebody is going to be me. Is that fair?
Yes. Yes. You know, and I want to encourage more of us, people like us, to represent ourselves. I know a lot of people, when you tell them, I want someone like you to run for office, they say, oh, I don't have the time and I don't have the money, or I can't be bothered, or let's leave it to the people who are already in office. You know, let's leave it to our experienced senators, and I say, no, like, we got where we are today by what we're doing, by the fact that we're not involved, and that one of the first questions I was asked with running for office was, well, how much money do you have? And my question to them was, is that that's the only way that we're qualifying our candidates today, is by how much money you have? Because if we're at war with the 1%, it seems like we're picking from the wrong team. If we're only picking people who have millionaires, or people who take contributions, to fund their campaign from the industries that we don't want represented. Were you able to hear me that time? Okay, now I can't hear you. Hang on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I think you had your mic muted.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
They were saying that my mic sounded like I was in a gas or in a can or something, so it wasn't coming across very well. I switched to this microphone, and I'm hoping that this one works a little bit better than the other one. Okay. You said the Democratic Party asked, okay, good. They say better. You said they asked you how much money could you raise. Now, this is interesting because this has been happening all across the country, where Democrats are asking candidates, and I've even read conversations that the person has had, what the Democrats would say, how much cash can you raise? As if that's the main and important thing. Not what do you represent, how much cash can you raise? And you make the point that if the only thing that you're asking about right off the bat is how much cash can you raise, that's going to give you a certain type of person who's running. It's like, it's somewhat of the same problem. If somebody is giving you a lot of money, then you are somehow beholden to the person who's giving you a lot of money. The idea that that this plutocrat is giving you money just for, just to give you money is somewhat insane. It's an investment. That investment pays off. And I think we can look at our world to see that investment has paid off magnificently. So from your standpoint, you're not taking money from corporate sources. Ultimately, you're taking small donations. Is that
right?
Fair? Okay.
Yes, and trying to keep the campaign to a grassroots campaign where we're using emails and we're using the live stream video, because the costs of going on TV, this is what makes campaigns, one of the factors anyway, that makes campaigns so expensive. And like you said, so I not only do I want to, do I hope to win with the grassroots campaign, but I also hope to establish a method and free public financing and get more people who are who are not representative of the 1%, the 99%ers. I want to make it easier for them to run for office, because when you hire someone for a job, you ask them what qualifies them. And you don't ask them how much money is in your checkbook. So if we don't have a clear idea of what we want in our public officials, then we're not asking the right questions. Then obviously we're not going to get the right representation.
So let me ask you this: what are you representing? And you're running against Bob Menendez, right?
Right. Well, I was heartbroken when Bernie lost. I think Bernie had the right idea. In fact, I have Bernie's book, Our Guide to Political Revolution, on my website, because I really think it talks about all of my issues, the problems of today, and the solutions, and how we need to solve them. And basically, it starts with the progressive tax, where if we tax the 1%, we're going to be able to use that money to put it into education and healthcare for everyone and our infrastructure. When we don't have a progressive tax, the 1% is going to use that money. There's no regulation. I mean, government is designed to regulate corporations and spend the money so that it's best used for the country and not in the hands of 1%. Corporations let to do what they want, will pollute the air, will pollute the environment. They basically put profits over people.
Yeah.
And our only way of fighting back is to have the government make sure that we regulate them and we make sure that they pay their fair share of taxes.
Yeah,
So,
I think, yeah, I agree with you. You're kind of making this point that without tax, you kind of drain the government of sources, especially talking about state governments. You drain resources away that's needed for certain programs, either healthcare, education, even building projects. I mean, even this idea of building and development itself for the society, those things kind of get drained away the moment that you kind of take those tax cuts. I'll give you another example. West Virginia with what is his name? He's practically a Republican, Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin, when he was governor, was passing tax cuts that essentially drained money from the coffers of that state. The teachers who went on strike, those teachers were the worst paid, or some of the worst paid in the country. And part of the reason they were worst paid like that was because of Joe Manchin. Like the state didn't have the resources that it needed to do the things that that state needed to do. So I agree with you on that. What you're running for Senate against Bob Menendez. Why you versus Bob Menendez? What was the thing that said, okay, I got to get out of bed to do this? Why do you believe that Bob Menendez is not the person to represent New Jersey?
Well, another thing that we want to do to keep our government in check is we want to make sure people have term limits. And he's been in office for over 25 years. And when you're in office that long, you're going to have name recognition. You're going to have people that, you can do favors for, and you're going to be subject to corruption because you're in office so long. And the reason that I'm going to be involved is because I believe I'm going to represent the 99%. I still have the day-to-day problems that the 99%ers have, where Bob Menendez is taking bribes and flying off in private jets. I'm experiencing the same potholes and car repairs and trying to make the money in the month match that you are.
Essentially, and Bob is a different life. Bob lives, like the life of a plutocrat is somehow fundamentally different than the life that we live. Yes, they breathe. Yes, they, go to the bathroom. The basic human elements are there. It's just our society creates kind of a substructure on top of the regular reality, in which case these guys can kind of float above. You're saying Bob Menendez is somewhat removed from the day-to-day problems that most people deal with, and yet he is voting on things that affect most people. It's like, shouldn't people who are affected by those things be the ones who are making those decisions? I think that answer is yes. So what are you, who deal with the day-to-day issues that regular human beings deal with and are not on this kind of rarefied air, what are you pushing for as a candidate? I looked at your you and I talked, like, I think on Saturday night, and you came across as a lefty to me, which is why I invited you onto the show. What are you pushing as a candidate? What are the things that you represent? What are the things that you vote for? What are your values? What are the things you dislike? Explain to the public who you are. I know that's a wild, expansive question, but I'm doing it in that way so you can kind of explain who you are and what are the things that you value and you will push for once you get in office.
Right. And I don't mean to get back to the money issues, but Bob Menendez had deregulated. He deregulated the bank, or helped deregulate the banks. Then we ended up having the bank bailout, where he approved TARP, and now he finds that there's an opportunity for him to further deregulate the money market funds, and he wants to go ahead and do that. So my frustration with him is, now you didn't even learn from your mistakes. You didn't learn that the last time that we deregulated banks, that we had this almost worldwide financial crisis.
Lisa,
and
you're far less cynical than I am. It's not that he didn't learn from his mistakes. Like you said before, Bob is not necessarily touched by this. Like from his standpoint, if you're bribing him, even if it's quote unquote legal bribery, and the whole point is deregulation because deregulation helped the people who are putting money in his pocket. It's not that he didn't learn, it's that he didn't care. He was incentivized not to care by the fact that nobody went to prison. He didn't go to prison. He's perfectly okay. Um, I I am far more cynical than you are on this.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't fully mean to interrupt. I guess I was making the point that politicians go with the way they're pushed. And I always say dollars and pitchforks. He has a lot of dollars behind Bob Mendez. There are very few pitchforks. You're one of those pitchforks. So right. I guess that's what I'm saying. But I'm sorry. Explain what you mean by the money issues with Bob Mendez. He didn't learn from the prior financial issue. And he's continuing to try to deregulate, or is on board for deregulating even more. In fact, they did, right? Was Bob Mendez one of the people who voted for the deregulation of the banks?
Yes.
Even this rollback recently, the one that just passed the House and the Senate. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it is. And when we see this and we think that, like I said, when you go back to the question, who do we want to represent us? And you ask how much money do they have? You're saying, wait a minute, you're feeding the beast. Yeah. Now you're telling him go out and deregulate some more because you're not going to win if you don't have the money. So you better go out and do whatever you can to get the money so that we can elect you again. In fact, the war chest, Bob Menendez, I think, has $10 million, and Bob Hugin, the Republican candidate, has $40 million. Well, by that effort, they're going to vote for.
Say that again. Say that again. Bob Menendez has a war chest of $10 million, and the Republican has $40 million for state race?
In his war chest. Yeah.
Wow. Jesus Christ. I always say, what do they do for that money? I mean, even the Democrat, what do you do for that money? That is an astonishing amount of money for a state race. What is Ossoff? That Republican called himself a Democrat that ran against the other Republican, raised, what, $21 million? And that race was like mind-blowingly expensive. Wow. Why do they get this much cash? Like, how do they get this much cash? For that matter, take the Republican out, because we're talking about Bob Menendez. Why are they giving Bob Menendez $10 million? What is Bob Menendez doing for that money?
Yeah. I mean, well, like we talked about, the deregulation of the banks. There's corruption in New Jersey because the gas companies want to do fracking. So if they can buy themselves their rights to frack in New Jersey, they can destroy the government and sell natural gas. But it's all based upon, what privileges are we going to allow the corporations that they're willing to pay for, that they're going to turn around and make a profit on. So when you start thinking like that, you realize they don't have the interest of New Jersey inside heart. They don't care if we have clean energy. They want to know how much they're going to get for endorsing a certain candidate, and how much how much profit they're looking to make. Even Phil Murphy was talking about giving $9 million to Amazon just to move to our state and hold their offices here.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I said, yeah, I mean, I said, well, isn't there an advantage to Amazon that we don't have to need to pay them that kind of money for them just to come here and, sell their services?
And look, that's an amazing point. I mean, you're talking the race to the bottom argument. Essentially, if this state is paying Amazon, then another state raises the amount of money it pays Amazon. Then another state says, we'll take the tax money that we would get and give to Amazon. Missing the point that if Amazon doesn't have workers, if Amazon doesn't have clean air, if Amazon doesn't have streets, if Amazon police, firefighters, if Amazon doesn't have those things, Amazon cannot make any profit or any money at all. They kind of miss that. They utterly miss it. So what are you representing when you're moving, when you're going into office? Bob Menendez, I understand he's a crook, but what are you? What are the things that you're pushing for in the Senate?
Well, after elected and after we get past, the big money in campaign financing, because if we have public financing, we can actually have the people choose representatives that are going to represent the 99%. And after we get to that, then we can talk about the human issues that's important to all of us. People are dying for not being covered on Medicare, okay, or not being covered for insurance. And I spoke to people, and I mean, when you start looking again, you start looking at Bernie's book, and he explains that when you have a for-profit healthcare, it's your money or your life. So we want to bring, I mean, Blue Cross and Blue Shield was a good insurance company when it was a nonprofit company, and they weren't paying their CEOs $490 million a year, and they were actually using the premiums to pay for the medical expenses and to pay doctors and pay hospitals.
Wow.
But if you look at Bernie's book, you would be astonished, and he's got the list of all of the pharmaceutical industries and how much they pay their CEOs, and it's an enormous amount of money.
You know, it does logically make sense. I mean, I think Americans think that the world is kind of like they are, like the bottom 98%. You know, they go about their affairs, they make a certain wage and everything else, and I don't think they realize that it's different when you're in a different context. And so you're in a healthcare thing, you still make a lot of money, but the way that CEO makes that millions and millions of dollars is by trying to pinch and tweak healthcare. Meaning, I need to deprive certain people of healthcare with some kind of regulation, or I need to pay myself a huge amount of cash, which means the amount of healthcare I can offer is going to be less. Like, I agree with you on this. I absolutely agree with you on this.
Yeah. And we're led to believe that privatization is good. I mean, the things that they're talked about in the media today, like taxes are bad and regulations are they're not necessary. These things are just false. And when you have people with this kind of money who are able to, put commercials in, I mean, they did it with the cigarette industry, years back, and we're telling you, 4 out of 5 doctors recommended specific type of
smoking, yeah,
cigarette. Okay. And that's what we're talking about. When you have so much money that you have more power than the government, and you're able to actually teach people to vote against their interests.
Yeah.
And I mean, and as far as the Senate and their budget, the budgetary concerns, they tripled their defense spending since 2001. Now, we were the number one country in defense spending. We spent more than all the other countries in the world back in 2001. Why did that need to be tripled by 2016?
Oh, I agree with you.
And you ask yourself, how is raising $80 billion, I think it was, and they also want to put $1 trillion into nuclear weapons. How can they justify that and then tell us that we don't have money for healthcare?
Think about that. It goes beyond. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's always amazing. The $80 billion on a whim. They didn't, nobody debated it or anything. Should we give the military $80 billion? Yes. Done. And they move on as if nothing has just taken place. That's $80 billion. Bernie Sanders' college thing was less than the money that they just raised on the military on a whim. The federal jobs guarantee, when you actually look at the amount that it will likely cost, $230 billion. Our military budget is nearly $1 trillion a year. It's mind-blowing, the things that they say and the things they try to get people to accept. One thing on the Medicare thing, Medicare has like a 2% overhead. Medicare has like a 2% overhead because Medicare is not out for profit. It's not trying to, gouge and skimp. Like, think about it. You break your arm or you're sick. And ultimately, the insurance company is trying to find ways to not, give you care, because ultimately they benefit when they don't give care. Is they have to some degree ration it. But the reason they ration it is to give that guy as much money as he can get. Like, this stuff, it's a for-profit business as opposed to being in the interest of the person who has the illness, who's there sick. Like, it's a gross industry, man. You're all of the failings of the human being from the standpoint of health, and they're profiting off of people's misery and cancer and whatever other disease. So what would you do? Well, so based on the bills that come up in the Senate and so forth, what would be, I guess what I'm asking, and I'm trying to get to a specific thing. What are the things that you yourself are pushing for in the Senate, just as a standpoint of policy objectives, from the standpoint of items that may come up? For example, military. So Donald Trump has been fomenting resentment against Iran, against less so Syria, definitely being belligerent against North Korea. He's been pushing our allies away from the standpoint of Europe. Do you believe that we should be in Syria? And do you believe that that war is illegal?
You know, I listened to Ambassador come speak, and I was very excited. And I thought, oh, good, I'm going to hear all about foreign policy and how different it is from the United States, and I can get into this nuances and why we're in wars with other countries and what are we doing there. And then when he started talking about a lot of the reasons that we're in there, it's all about money again. The same corporations and dictators who are trying to abuse their people and get money and power and influence and make deals with the United States so that they can be the number one export of whatever and be able to treat their people inhumanely. And if we go back to the same purpose of government, it's not just what we're doing in the United States, it's what we're doing worldwide.
Yeah.
We want to encourage the world to have environmental standards and not to exploit the people and not to have starving people on the streets and not have people who are making $1 a day wage or who are working in dangerous conditions. And once we work on those problems and we stop people from exploiting, I believe that the world will be a more peaceful place because people don't want to kill their customers.
Agreed. I mean, you know, one of the Tulsi Gabbard comes back and tells Jake Tapper, we need to stop arming terrorists in Syria. And Jake Tapper reflexively tells her the United States government says it's not doing that. Well, at this point, we know. You know, it's not one of those things that we don't know. And to your point, Iraq, you know, it's like we liberated Iraq. And now you have CEOs coming out saying, you know, talking about the oil profits and stuff like that and the companies that have taken over in Iraq after killing all of those people. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's a riot. Or not a racket. It's a racket to some degree. I totally agree with you. And it's this kind of capitalistic influence that kind of pushes the stuff along. Partially. I mean, there is this kind of thing of geopolitical influence. So I'm going to let me ask you one more thing. One of the things that comes up is Medicare for all, and not just Medicare for all, even school. Do you believe that people should be able to get health care when they need health care without that health care being rationed in a ridiculous degree? Or that they're being gouged. Let me say it that way. It's not rational, but people being gouged because rates have gone up like 50% in some of these places. I understand the Republicans had part of it, but let's be honest that Obamacare was somewhat fractured or not necessarily the best plan because it wasn't revolving around the person. And a college also, should people be able to go to school?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love people who argue that owning a gun should be a right and healthcare not so much.
Not so much. We should have a right to hold this weapon that can murder people, but no, I don't believe that people should be able to get healthcare. Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. I think, you know, if you take money out of all of these questions, they become really simple answers. Yes, of course. If we're the richest, most powerful country in the world, we want all of our citizens to have a good education from pre-K to college. We want to train the future generation to do the jobs that we need here in America. We don't want to have to import talent from other countries. We want to invest in our roads, in our infrastructure, in our schools, in our healthcare programs, and all the things that when you take money out of the question, these are things that are more important than money. And I love to say, you know, if you go back to the desert island and you think, well, what do I need to survive? Oh, yeah, I need a pile of money. You know, and you realize, no,
because your point is that money is real. Like, ultimately, you can't eat that money on a desert island. You can't do anything with that money on a desert island. It's not real. I love that you said that. God, I love that you said that. Because you're making this awesome point that I think a lot of people miss. That between the human being and the human experience, that human being is real. That money is a social construct. It's not so much real. The idea that you would say money is more important than this human being getting healthcare or education is abhorrent. God, I love that you said that. Why don't other people think like you from the standpoint of politics? Why doesn't Bob Mendez or why doesn't Joe Manchin or some of these other guys think like you from the standpoint of the philosophical? Because what it comes across to me is you're similar to me in this. you have a philosophical view of politics. You know, it's what is the point of government? Asking those basic questions. Well, the point of government is to essentially make sure that people have the things that they need, and to, I mean, Marx will go with this idea of class antagonisms, but ultimately make sure that people have the things that they need. Create this kind of societal structure in this way, not necessarily to be preyed upon by corporations and kind of, you know, contorted into doing their bidding. Um, what? Why don't other politicians have that particular perspective in the same way that you do?
Well, I think, it goes all the way back to Reaganomics and the belief. I've actually had some business owners start to explain to me why he couldn't pay a living wage to his employees. And I smiled and I thought, you're so naive because you're not thinking about the fact that healthcare has been put on your back as a small business owner. You're not thinking about the fact that you're paying more in taxes than companies like ExxonMobil and Amazon as a small business owner. So you're being taxed at a way higher rate than you can afford, when the people who can afford it aren't being taxed appropriately. And when we go back and we study history and we go back to the New Deal and FDR, we realize that they had an up to a 90% tax rate after your first $1 million.
Yes, they did.
And when I talk to people and they tell me I can't afford to pay you a living wage, and I hear them say, well, tax cuts are good for everybody. I don't want to pay a 90% over my first $1 million. How could I possibly live on only $1.1 million a year? And I say, excuse me? You want me to live on less than $35,000, but you're going to struggle at $1.1 million?
Yeah, I agree. And you know what the sad part about it is? Whether they realize it or not, I think FDR wanted 100% over a certain amount. Congress pushed back on them, and they were able to get like 98%, something to that effect. Businesses make more under that guise. Like they're squeezing. They've gotten to the point where they've squeezed people so much that people don't necessarily have the money to invest into the economy. Without the bottom putting into the economy, Mitt Romney may have $250 million, but Mitt Romney is not going to buy 100 million cars. You know what I mean? Look,
right.
People themselves are the ones that push the economy forward. If those people don't have income, or if those people are not making a decent wage, they can't put their money into the economy. It's like these guys are killing themselves or eating themselves. I agree with you completely. One of my subscribers says, Beltazar 228, he says, I moved from Boulder, Colorado to Basalt, Colorado. My premium went from $247 a month to $727 a month. My choices of provider went from 5 to 1. My coverage is worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, if we leave the insurance companies involved, it's all about profits over people.
That's right.
And like we're talking about Medicare for all, we're talking about the very low overhead of the administrative costs, which gives you better coverage and costs people. I think it's something like $400 million less per year to go to the single payer health system than the system that we have today.
That's amazing.
And that would be covering the same people.
Even your point, you're making good points. Even your point about the insurer, that healthcare, that boss who's complaining about insurance and everything else, whether he realizes it or not, the amount that he pays may actually go down because healthcare has been put on the back of businesses in this country. Why? Mm-hmm. Like that. So if I lose my job, my healthcare is attached to my business. What if I start a small business myself? Now I don't have healthcare. What if I go into some other industry where I'm doing my own solo work? Now I don't have healthcare because the healthcare was attached to the company. Not to mention that company is now paying for healthcare from all of these workers, making that company much less competitive with other countries, let's say like Germany or France, that actually have healthcare. Like it's like they bought into the propaganda that this is a bad idea, and this is somehow limiting options, not realizing that the system that we have now is so haphazard that it undercuts our options.
And a company like Walmart that's paying $8 an hour, people have to go now to the state and ask to be covered for health care because they're not making a living wage. And a company like Walmart has a lot more profits coming in than somebody who makes, say, $750,000 a year in a small business.
West Virginia teachers. If you remember, one of the things that pushed that strike forward was health insurance. They were already pushed to the margins from the standpoint of money that they were getting. I think they were like 48th in the country from the standpoint of the money they were earning. So paying that teacher was nothing. And on top of that, now healthcare costs went up. So it's like
Mhm.
from nothing, you're trying to extract a pound of flesh, almost
Mhm.
literally. And they said enough, and it pushed back. You're absolutely right. Let me ask you this. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell my audience before I leave? Something about your campaign, something about you, something about why you're running. It's up to you. I leave this question to be expansive and totally up to the person who's being asked.
Well, I just want to give people a glimmer of hope and let them know if they think that the government is corrupt or that it's all politicians are corrupt, that we have a vote and we are able to do something about it and we're able to run for office. And I'm encouraging people to come to my website at lisamccormick.org to find out, even in New Jersey, how to run for office, what offices have become open, because basically it's a job for more than one person. We've got a lot of things that need to be addressed, a lot of problems today, and it's not enough to have one person do it.
Very cool. Very cool. This is one of those things where they said, you know, who I think most people don't kind of get into their heads to think of running for office, even though most people kind of feel that something is wrong. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't occur to them that, oh, wait, I can do this, or I could be one of the people to run. I am infinitely glad and even proud to some degree that you're doing this. Now, proud, this means nothing to you because you don't, I'm just some random stranger, but seeing a regular person say, I'm going to run for office because nobody else is meeting the needs of the public itself is an amazing thing. So I'm not in New Jersey, but if I was, you'd have my vote. And thank you very much for running.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I
Very
appreciate it.
cool. I'm so glad you're here. And good luck tomorrow. When is the election, by the way? The election is tomorrow?
Yes, the election's tomorrow. Polls close at 8, Jim's adding.
All right. Polls close at 8. The election is tomorrow, New Jersey. Lisa McCormick for Senate. Give her your support if you're if your ears are listening to this broadcast. So thank you again, Lisa. Thank you for coming on.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. I'm going to end this here. Lisa McCormick, State, New Jersey. Give her your support. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the patron. Thanks, everyone.